Once again, we celebrate Palm Sunday and Passion Sunday. The celebration marks the beginning of holiday. Today, we find ourselves celebrating the great entrance of Jesus into Jerusalem, as he is welcomed by the crowds and his disciples as the King that comes in the name of the Lord. When we look into the context of text, during that time, a king would come, seated on a donkey, surrounded by his royal guards, dressed in the finest clothing and with expensive jewelry. People would hail the king and sing songs of praise. But when we look at Jesus, this man has no resemblance of a king. He is not dressed like one. He doesn't have expensive jewelry on him. He has no royal guards, but just a group of followers. Mostly they were poor ones, and they were there, hailing him as a king. What a contradiction. Praising him as a royalty, though he doesn't look like royalty. If we had to take the scene and move it to our current context, I am sure that the outcome would be completely different. Unfortunately, our society tends to value what seems to be classy and neglect what looks humble. We usually elevate those that dress well educated, those with good jobs, and then we neglect those without. My husband once left a formal event, and with his friends, they decided to go to a familiar restaurant. And when they were there, they were treated different from the treatment that they would normally get. And after so many compliments about what he and the friend were wearing, he started to realize that today I'm getting this treatment only because I'm wearing my collar, which is they only respect him because he's a priest. So all this other time, they just looked at him and then they felt like he's just an ordinary man. He doesn't deserve to be praised. He doesn't deserve to be held as king. But today, we see Jesus, who was informal, hailed as king. This is just a glimpse of many other experiences that many of us do go through in our life. Can be in restaurants, it can be anywhere, including even in our churches. Most of the time, people will classify you and treat you based on your appearance or what you're doing for a living or the kind of money that you have or anything that you can think of. Jesus, the one that crowds hate him as a king, most of his lifetime, he did not live or behave like a king. The things he spent his time doing, the people he spent most of his time with, are not worthy to be associated with a king or even be in the circle of friends with a king. Jesus spent his time with poor people, teaching them about the kingdom of God and the blessedness that awaited all of them. He was best friends with fishermen that were of the lower class. People undermined them. He spent time with sinners and non-religious people, speaking about God's love for all his children without distinction. Whether poor, whether rich, whether you have a sense of style, whether you do not have, the love doesn't choose. He forgave sinners that were most of their life condemned by others for their sins. Jesus cured the sick and set free the demon-possessed. especially those that were cast outside, those that were not wanted by the community, because of their illnesses and their possessions, they were already classified as the unwanted. But Jesus went there and spent time with them. Definitely, these are not the traits of a king. A king would not spend his time with such people. A king would not want to have anything to do with them, because kings are always focused on not mostly their character. Their character is not so always good, but their reputation more than the character. But Jesus was different. So what kind of a king does this crowd hate? What kind of a king who does things different from the kings of his time? Paul, in his writings to the Philippians, reminds them that Christ is the very nature of God. But even though he was God himself, he did not consider that as an advantage in the relationships with those that he encountered throughout his life and ministry. He had a chance to just be with those that were privileged and move away from those that were less privileged. But instead, he did the opposite. Jesus chose to be made nothing and to take our human nature. He chose to come to earth and be a servant, a God that chooses not his royalty, but his life of a servant. As people, if I come from a royalty family, I would want to be known. I would want everybody to know that I come from such and such a family, because I want people to look at me and treat me differently because of where I come from. Though being a God, Jesus was always humble. And through that, he shared our human nature and showed to all of us the love that God has for each one of us without distinction, without variance. Brothers and sisters, the king that we held as we processed around the church invites us to make a self-introspection and reflect on our own nature, on our own self, his way of life, his manners towards others. We, as his followers, are invited to adhere to the same principles. God has blessed each one of us with different skills, different opportunities in life, different accomplishments. How then do we use those blessings? How do they shape our way of life? Are we like the kings that surround themselves only with those of the same class and wait to be stepped? Or do we strive to be like the Son of God, that though being God himself, he chose to be humble and serve others, and be with others without distinguishing who they are and where they are from? This Palm Sunday, we celebrate Jesus' entrance into Jerusalem. But I want us to also celebrate Jesus' example entering in our hearts and in our lives. And let us allow ourselves to be modeled by his example. He showed us that humility doesn't choose who you serve at the moment. Let us allow Christ to be in our lives and guide us. And this humility shouldn't just be our thing for this moment during this Palm Sunday. Let us carry it on until we see another Palm Sunday. Amen.